Now, Finn Clark's review for The Two Doctors published on the 4th of the 11th, 06. Just like The Power of Kroll, The Two Doctors starts well but goes downhill. However, in fairness, neither story was written under ideal circumstances for poor Robert Holmes. The Power of Kroll was a last-minute replacement for an abandoned story, while this one had to be wrenched from its original setting of New Orleans. Furthermore, it's an old-fashioned six-parter to date the last since the Armageddon Factor in 1979. It's a mark of Robert Holmes' success on this count that people criticising this story never seem to take that into account. Personally, I think it's fascinating. Part 1 has a thematic depth and richness that's almost unparalleled throughout Doctor Who. It repays attention in a way one doesn't normally see. Stories like Pyramids of Mars or Tomb of the Cybermen are cracking yarns, but no more. They're just good tales well told. This, however, has two different extensively explored themes. It's a cliché that six-parters should in some sense be two stories in one, although even a glance at Troughton era six-parters will show you that you violate that rule at your peril. The Two Doctors, however, has two TARDIS crews with two interweaving plot threads, two sets of villains, two settings, and two themes. I was particularly impressed by the latter, most stories not even managing one. The first theme is about hunting and killing lesser beings, usually for food. The first Dr. Perry scene is all about fishing, where the Doctor ends up saying, "Did you see the one that got away? The magnificent gumblejack that was trying to eat this poor little fellow?" Naturally, he throws back the minnow. Back in 1985, I never took seriously the punchline about a healthy vegetarian diet, despite the nut rolls in Revelation of the Daleks, but in fact it's the culmination of the story's themes. Robert Holmes is a vegetarian and has strong feelings on these issues, but fortunately he didn't write some holier-than-thou sermon. On the contrary, he dashed off a riot of sick gags and tastelessness. They don't feel pain the same way we do. That's one theme. The other concerns your innate nature and what happens when you try to change it, as summed up in the beautiful line, "Give a monkey control of its environment, it'll fill the world with bananas." There's Chessine's double identity as shown in her relationship with Dastari and Shockeye. Dastari thought he could change her, but in fact he created a monster that made horrific plans with the Sontarans. Then there's the Doctor. Colin Baker's mysterious mind links with Troughton, after the first of which, incidentally, it's interesting how quickly he decides to visit Dastari. More importantly, this is a sixth Doctor shortly after his regeneration, meeting an embodiment of his own instability and shape-shifting. He gets affected by his former self being kidnapped and or androcomed, for the temporal physics of this is counterintuitive. Celery, that's what you need. Jelly babies. There's also the minor detail of Time Lord genetic inheritance. Normally the Doctor's just a hero who appears and solves your problems, but here Robert Holmes explored his nature more deeply than any other story. What's more, it's no identikit, anniversary get-together. These specific Doctors are important to the story, the second's innocence and the sixth's instability, and all that in a J&T laundry list commission of a multi-Doctor story. I think it's wonderful. Holmes would soon take these ideas somewhere even darker with the Valeyard. We have Troughton being pitched into the Saywood universe for all its brutality and Time Lord obsessions. Much went wrong with Doctor Who in the mid-80s, but for precisely that reason Colin Baker's era makes an even more complete thematic whole than Eccleston's. It's the rotting fruit of Eric Saywood's scary vision, a universe collapsing in upon itself, full of old monsters and continuity. Time Lords are everywhere. We start with a villainous but sympathetic one in the Twin Dilemma, and finish with Trial of a Time Lord and the Ravelox conspiracy. In the end, even the Doctor will be evil. Somehow the retcon of a shockingly old Troughton working for Gallifrey feels oddly fitting. Thus his meeting with Dastari ends with a massacre and Jamie abandoned, after which we get the Sixth Doctor charging full steam ahead into a killer space station controlled by a homicidal computer. As in Attack of the Cybermen, we get this Doctor's appalling lyricism about death. Fruit soft flesh peeling from white bones, the unholy unbearable smell of Armageddon. Nothing quite so evocative as one sense of smell. Perry's response is simple, "I feel sick." Suddenly this unlikable TARDIS crew works. Troughton's era was about joyful escapism. He wanted to be there, to travel with him. Not so with Colin Baker. Perry whines, complains and doesn't want to be there, but that's understandable since their adventures are so horrible. This is the Saywood-averse, which pours petrol over wish fulfillment and lights a match. Robert Holmes even tries to make us wonder if the Time Lords perpetrated this massacre. I never believed that in 1985, but today it's more credible. This is the age of Time Wars and Lawrence Miles' sinister Gallifreyans. What kind of monster would want to stop the brilliant work that was being done here? Asked the Doctor. Bearing in mind developments in just the Colin Baker era, perhaps we were wrong to be so dismissive of Holmes' suggestions. As an aside, The Two Doctors is almost a prototype for Lawrence Miles' Interference, a multi-Doctor story that puts a classic TARDIS crew from a more innocent age into the grimmer, nastier universe of the then current era. Both star the worst TARDIS crew ever seen. in that medium. Both stories are also riddled with continuity, Time Lords, and weird biotechnology, with a Doctor imprisoned for a stretch in the middle. So I like the script's ideas. What about the production? It's directed by Peter Moffat, which isn't a good sign, although he's far from my least favourite director. At least he gives a shit, unlike Pennant Roberts, and he usually elicits decent performances. You can't blame him for the twins in The Twin Dilemma. He's not the best judge of tone, as shown by The Visitation's Richard Mason here, Oscar Botcherby, but on the other hand, his shows tend to look pretty. State of Decay, The Visitation, and Mordred Undead are all easy on the eye. The imagery in The Two Doctors is similarly attractive, with a space station as good looking as Seville in the Spanish countryside. The Sontarans look unconvincing, but no more than usual, while their eyes in that mask can be surprisingly expressive. Regarding the space station, returning to it in an abandoned state is such a neat visual trick that I'm surprised it wasn't used more often. Doctor Who's best take on that idea to date is actually the Destiny of the Doctor's computer game, which took the Grok to all kinds of different time zones, including one that was flooded and underwater. Here, of course, we have the further twist of wondering what the hell happened, although we have some idea. The production's worst misstep is Oscar Botcherby. In the script he's great, being basically Henry Yago from the talons of Wen Chiang. Unfortunately, on screen he's a loser. Yes, he's basically ineffectual and a failure as an actor, but the production undermines his comic moments with inappropriate music, and never really has fun with the character. John Stratton has enormous fun with Shockeye, e.g. the Rat, and that's why the character is so vivid on screen. Oscar just seems like a waste of space, which is why his death in episode 3 feels so wrong. He hasn't been given enough weight to justify it. The production never took him seriously. I don't blame Holmes one jot. The final Oscar's too nerdy and tentative, which undercuts the comedy as well as the drama. He should have been more theatrical, a larger-than-life presence on a par with Shockeye et al. James Saxon achieves a kind of baffled sweetness in the role, but basically he's awful. Mind you, about Oscar's death, everything is misjudged. The guitar music is especially wrong, but that whole sequence is painful. Personally, I suspect that Robert Holmes would have played it as comedy, so black has to be barely detectable as comedy, if that makes sense. Incidentally, one could almost regard Oscar as a surrogate Sixth Doctor with a knee to his pretty companion. Colin Court Fish and Oscar Court Moffs, both are slightly pompous characters who love theatricality and language. The difference is that Oscar is squeamish, killing moths but hating the sight of blood. The Sixth Doctor, on the other hand, is practically scary in Part 3 as he sets up Chessine and the Sontarans to murder each other and then sits back merrily to watch the carnage. Oscar aside, however, the cast's fun to watch. Obviously, I was delighted to see Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines again. They've always been one of Doctor Who's most sparkling combinations, even if they don't get enough to do here. Fraser is great even when getting almost no lines, while Troughton is obviously having the time of his life. He even gets to be bad. I was disappointed that his Doctor-O-Gun wasn't evil enough to be scary, but he's still relishing every moment. Jacqueline Pearce is fun too, but the obvious standout in the guest cast is John Stratton. He's enjoying himself almost as much as Patrick Troughton, although it's interesting that they didn't try to make him particularly scary. Imagine some huge ex-convict stalking Jamie through the space station or Perry through Seville. That could have been terrifying. In season 22, it's curious that Perry has heard of Jamie and Joe, but knows nothing of Cybermen, Sontarans, and Daleks. Doctor, priorities? On a related topic, it's lucky for Robert Holmes that Pertwee had already known about the Sontarans before the Time Warrior. The Two Doctors is slightly awkward to watch and gets a bit run-aroundy in its later episodes, but I don't blame Robert Holmes for that. It's a six-parter. More than anything else, this story needed a director in sympathy with Holmes's gleeful delight in gore and theatricality. Hell, reshooting Oscar Botcherby scenes would fix 90% of this story's problems. Read the novelization. It's even more gruesome than the TV version, but it's also hilarious. It's a shame that Holmes never wrote another. This story is full of good stuff, but I like its richness best. Those themes come through loud and clear. I'm coming to realise that season 22 made some dreadful mistakes, but thematically is one of the show's richest eras. There cannot be a creature on the planet that humans do not kill and eat. Many beasts are bred especially for table. Even the Sontarans tie into the theme of using technology to overcome your own nature. They're a clone race, remember? The multi-Doctor stories seem to rub up many fans the wrong way, but personally I like them all. If you can see past the self-congratulation, there's much to admire. If nothing else, reflect on this. Patrick Troughton appeared in all 3 multi-Doctor stories, yet only 6 complete stories have survived from his own era. The Two Doctors may not be enough other war games, but I think it's one of Troughton's most fascinating stories.